Given that we're about to share a discussion with Max Büsser, arguably the modern-day father of collaborative watches, it makes sense for us to share some incredibly exciting news from us here at Collective. Tomorrow, November 19th, 2024, we will release our next collaboration, the CX, in partnership with our friends at Zenith. The CX is based off the Defy Skyline platform, and like our first collaborative watch, the C01, explores a specific era of design, in this case, German minimalist industrial design of the 1970s. The watch, which will be revealed on the 19th, features a dial that is deeply rooted in the design language of the era, a finishing in sandblasted stainless steel, and a movement configuration not found in any other Skyline to date. And that's just a little peek at what makes this watch so special and us so proud of it. The Zenith Defy Skyline CX will be available for immediate delivery starting tomorrow, Tuesday, November 19th. And you can sign up now for first access and updates on the release at collectivehorology.com. Now, on to the show. This is Open Work, a look inside the watch industry, a podcast from Collective Horology.
I'm Gabe Riley, co-founder of Collective.
And I'm Asher Apkin, co-founder of Collective.
Collective Horology is an independent watch retailer based in Southern California. We carry a wide range of independent brands, including Chapek, Singer Reimagined, J.N. Shapiro, and more. To learn more about us and check out our available inventory, visit collectivehorology.com.
Rarely, but sometimes, you find yourself caught on your back foot in the watch industry when you see something genuinely unusual, truly creative, and actually rare. And that's what I felt, as so many have, the first time they saw an MB&F. I first met our guest, Max Büsser, at a client dinner in California almost 10 years ago. I went in curious, and I came out thinking how I could remortgage my house to buy one of his watches. Since then, Max has not only remained an inspiration, but has also become a friend of ours, kindly spending time with us every time we go to Geneva. So on this episode of Open Work, we want to explore both the development of MB&F and Max's most recent brand, M.A.D.Editions. While both create watches unlike anyone else in the space, they exist at opposite ends of the horological spectrum, with MB&F producing around 400 pieces a year at prices mostly over 100,000 US, and M.A.D.Editions producing thousands of watches a year, but largely under 5K US. Today, we want to discuss the lessons learned starting and managing these two businesses and exploring the differences, similarities, and quirks of each end of the market. So, Max, welcome to Open Work.
Thank you, Asher. Thank you, Gabe. Great being here.
Well, it is fabulous to have you, and I'd like to dive in with an email that I got from you guys as a MB&F owner in the middle of the pandemic. And I remember this email because I was sitting in my daughter's room and we were playing on the floor. And I got this email that said, hey, I have something really special for you. It's something I've been working on. It's not a MB&F, but it's something that I've wanted to make. And by the way, it's going to cost a couple $1,000s and it's ready for you now. Rarely do I make impulse purchases in the thousands, but I impulse bought the M.A.D. one. And that's what I want to dive into with you. M.A.D.Editions started as a project to thank existing customers who supported your work through thick and thin. So at what point did M.A.D.Editions become its own brand and business? And you had insinuated in that email and in other contexts that this is something that you'd wanted to do for a long time. So I'd love to just understand that anchor and whether you thought of it as a brand when you launched it.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a long story. I'll try and keep it short. When I launched MB&F, when I created MB&F, that's 20 years ago in 2005, I'd already in parallel started working on another brand, which was actually called Green Dog, and never saw the light because I never found the funding because I put all my money in MB&F. And Green Dog was a watch which was going to be around $3,500. The dollar was much higher in those days. And so the reason was, nobody around me, nobody from my family, from my childhood friends can afford an MB&F. So 20 years later, I'm blessed that this brand actually still exists, that it's thriving, that there's a community, that we've been able to create 21 calibers, etc. But still, my childhood friends cannot afford it. And I felt bad about that. I felt that the people I love, they can't own something I've created. So over the last 20 years, I've always strived to try and create a brand which, don't get me wrong, this is not inexpensive, but it's much less expensive than MB&F. And so actually I designed what's going to become the M.A.D. one in 2014. That's 10 years ago. there's a whole backdoor story to that one, but we won't delve into that one. And I thought, that's it. That's going to be the second brand. Took me from 2014 to 2018 to work the whole brand concept. It was not called M.A.D.Editions. It was a different brand name. And there was all sorts of things happening around that brand. And I was enjoying myself immensely creating it. And then in 2018, end of 2018, I killed it. My whole team, well, half of the team was happy and the other half was aghast because they'd worked so much on it. And the reason
so the team you're talking about, these are employees of MB&F who are working on this with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason was my second daughter just been born in 2017, and I was completely sleep deprived, thinking, how am I going to balance already my life between family and MB&F? And wow, isn't that a completely insane idea to launch a second brand in parallel? I am completely off my rockers. So I decided, no, this doesn't work. I have to stop this. And we shelved it. Comes 17th of March, 2020, lockdown in Switzerland at least. And we're all in our homes doing our first Zooms. And I tell the team, look, guys, I've kept all the profits of the company in the company. There hasn't been much, but when you accumulate 15 years, there's enough to pay your salaries for the next 12 to 16 months. We had no idea if the government was going to help or not or whatever in those days. But if anybody's got an idea to make a few bucks, please speak up now. And we're brainstorming, and somebody in the team says, well, we've got that cheaper piece we created a few years ago. And I'm looking at that person going, seriously? Should we launch a new brand in the middle of global lockdown of the pandemic? No, of course not. And while we were talking about it, I don't know who, maybe it's me actually, said, maybe if we call it an edition, we can actually, it's not a brand. The problem of a brand is most people who create a brand don't understand. But when you create a brand, you're in it for life.
Yeah.
It's not about, let's have fun and make maybe a few bucks for a couple of years. Then no, you're in for, because it's virtually impossible to sell a micro brand, a small watch brands. I mean, up till when 1916 called then Watchbox bought the Béthune, no small brand had ever managed to sell itself. It was impossible. So that was not an option. So coming back to the M.A.D. edition, is like, well, maybe if we call it an edition, meaning we could just do 500 watches and then that's it. So that's what we decided. This is March 2020. By June, July, we realize it's not Armageddon. Actually, things are doing incredibly well. Actually, the amount of demand we're getting is way higher than pre-COVID. But we've launched the whole process in production. And now we're like, oh my God, what have we done? Come out with in those days, 1,900 Swiss francs, or I think something like $2,000, the original piece, brand, whatever you want to call it, edition, when we're MB&F. So when you've got nothing to lose, it's okay to do something like that. But suddenly MB&F is thriving again. And that's such a massive danger to have a super high-end artisanal brand. And then suddenly you come out with an industrial piece, which we're very clear, we're completely transparent, made in Asia, even though it was modified in Switzerland and assembled in Switzerland. All the components were made in Asia. What are we doing? What the hell have we launched? And that's the beginning of M.A.D. edition.
You brought up, first of all, that's a phenomenal story. But one thing that keeps sticking in my head is just thinking about your team. You know, here's a project that you'd been developing for years. It gets shelved. A team member throws the idea back out. You guys decide to take the approach. But then I'm wondering, from an operational standpoint, because the idea sounded awesome in the room, but then when you start executing it, things get hairy. So those first watches, were they being assembled by a third party, or were they being assembled at MB&F?
So then afterwards, we thought, now what are we going to do with these 500 pieces? And that's when we decided, okay, it's a one-time only, and it's only going to be there to say thank you to those who've enabled MB&F to exist. So it went from, let's make a few bucks to save the company, to let's say thank you. And it was originally going to be at 2,900 francs. And that's why, as we were saying thank you, we're basically, I'm not saying giving them away, but 1,900 francs. It was just to say a thank you. We had previously already worked on the whole process of production. So the whole R&D had been done. And it's interesting because when you do the R&D of a product which is so disruptive and has to be at such a low price point in comparison to what we're used to, but looks much more expensive. That's very important for us. When you wear a MAD1, and the same thing I hope will happen with 2, 3, 4, and etc., is nobody will think, oh, it's a $3,000 watch. They'll think it's a much more expensive watch. So there is an enormous part of R&D in that. You have to find smart solutions to get it at a certain price point, which we're not used to. And working on MAD 2, 3, 4, etc., I've been hitting walls one after the other where I'm like, oh, this isn't this cool. And my CTO will just look at us and go, just the sapphire glass is more than 3K at cost. Like, how are we going to make this? Oh, damn. Okay. So it's a completely different mindset, and the learning curve was crazy. So we did those 500. They were going to be only for those who would help the brand. And so the first pieces were so the Miyota, as I've already, I'll explain again. Why did we choose a Miyota? What's really cool with the MAD1 is, of course, the rotating triple blade rotor. And it rotates so well because it's a unidirectional winding system, meaning when you're seeing it turn that fast, it's not winding. It's when it's not turning fast that it's actually winding. And virtually all movements in the world are bidirectional today, which makes sense because you want it to wind in both sides. And the only one at that price point was the Miyota, which was still unidirectional, means it spins. And so we went for the Miyota, which is we all know it's a warhorse. It's by far not very precise, but I don't think that's the point. But we had to modify it because there's no way the Miyota can tract those 2 cylinders of the hours and the minutes. So we had to upgrade significantly the Miyota, and that we did in our workshops at MB&F. And not only did our 6, 7 incredible master watchmakers modify the Miyotas on those first pieces, they also did the whole assembly of the watches for those first 500 pieces. So if you've got one of those, you've got a very priceless piece. We probably gave out a couple of $1,000s with each watch, but it had to be like that because it was the watch which was going to all the MB&F owners, which had allowed us to arrive where we were.
Well, first of all, that's utterly fascinating, and I'm hoping it put a smile on the face of anyone who has one of the first editions for the tribe. The story obviously goes on from there. There have been a number of editions of the MAD1. You mentioned a MAD2, a MAD3, maybe even a MAD4. So at a certain time, this project or this edition moved from being a crazy idea, a one-off project to bridge you through the pandemic, just a thank you to your customers. At a certain point, and by the way, this would have been, I guess, in 2020.
It was 2020. It was late 20. Actually, the announcement was early 21, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, 21. So we're talking about the peak of not just COVID, but also watch demand and sort of COVID watch mania. And you decided, as well as I'm assuming everything was going for MB&F, as great as this edition had performed as a thank you gesture, you decided to keep going. How did you make the decision to keep going with M.A.D.Editions? And I guess, initially you described it as just an edition. At what point did it change from an edition into something more?
This has been very, very steep and long learning curve. And it just shows how we function at MB&F. We learn as we go. I try and surround myself only with people who've got a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. And it's really served us well. So here we are. We send that email out. Asher gets one. And We have not spoken about it. It's not on our website. It's not on our social media. We haven't spoken about it. And happens what I suppose had to happen, but honestly, and you're going to think I'm a little bit deranged, but we hadn't thought of it. 3 days or 4 days later, one of our customers posts on Instagram the photo. And then all hell breaks loose. When I say hell, it's a mix at the beginning of people going, wow, this is so cool. How can I get one? Which turns over the days and weeks into, you bastards. You finally created something that we can afford. We're MB&F fans. You've created something that I actually could get, and you're keeping it for those guys who actually can afford MB&Fs. Now, what's wrong with you? And I'm being polite because I heard some much worse discussions. And we got hammered. We got hammered over social media, and we still didn't talk. And this lasted for a month. We let the whole universe of social media take over with the angry people going, what's wrong with you guys? And we didn't speak because we didn't know what to do.
But if you didn't expect it, if you were really caught off sides on it, when you start hearing this, what goes through your head in that first moment?
Because I know I don't want this to be a brand. I know this is very dangerous for MB&F. And I just don't have the bandwidth. Our team doesn't have the bandwidth to deal with this. And this keeps on, and it's escalating. And as you know, it happens on social media. And we still haven't said a word. Not a word. And then after a month, we take this bold decision of basically Harris, who you know, our communication director, has been with me for 13 years now, basically puts an iPhone in front of my face and says, okay, you're going to have to say something now. And so I go on and take like 4.5 minutes and explain what MB&F, what M.A.D.Editions, how it came up to live and why it couldn't be a brand. And I finish off with saying, okay, we've heard you guys. Bear with us. We'll work on something. Because we had to basically stop this anger. And we still didn't know what the hell we were going to do. It was just like, okay, bear with us. We were trying to save some time.
And meanwhile, at this point, you're using master watchmakers to assemble Miyota movements. You've got demand that's going through the roof, and then suddenly this whole new thing is happening. Exactly. So your resources are already constrained.
And again, on MB&F also, it's an insane learning curve. For 16 years, I'm not going to say we were running around the world just trying to find a customer who would want a piece, but with some very rough years. And we were not used to at all. There was nothing in our DNA which made us used to having way more customers wanting the brand than what we were able to produce. So we were learning on MB&F, and we got this tsunami suddenly hitting us, which we were blindsided. And that's when we start brainstorming and going, now what do we do? And so, okay, let's then do one more. Let's just do one more. You know, like that extra one concert. Let's do one more. And then we're brainstorming like, what should we do? And I remember the original first one for the public was supposed to be green. And it was just the moment that we saw that green was becoming super fashionable. We're like, no, we can't do green because everybody will want green. So what color does everybody hate? Red. Everybody hates red. Let's do it red. So we'll have less customers. And so we're going, okay, so what do we hate? We hate drops. Oh my gosh. I remember as a youngster trying to get the concert tickets of this big festival between Lausanne and Geneva called Paléo. And it's always like at 2 or 2:30 p.m. And I was a young guy working, and you have to suddenly isolate yourself and try and get your credit card, and in front of all your colleagues, we're all basically on the same computer.
We're well familiar with running something like you're running a space shuttle command center. And
you're like, God, I hated those drops. And of course you didn't get what you wanted and the bot got them and whatever. And like, no, you don't want that. What do we hate? Oh my God. Do we all love queuing in front of a store and being treated like a dog? God, no. So now we're not going to do that, are we? And then we realized maybe the kindest way was to do a raffle. So we invented the raffle. We created the red. We had a certain amount of pieces. I think we had 1,000 pieces planned. It took us a year. Because that came to beginning of 2022. And then we said, again, remember at MB&F, our mantra is treat people the way you want to be treated. So there had been a certain amount of people who'd written to us, emails. Thousands had written on social media, but there were 550, I think, or 400, I think it's 550, who had written us emails. And we'd archived all those emails saying, if you ever do one that I can buy, please don't forget me. And so basically we sent an email to all of those 550 said, here's the link. If you want to buy it, you can buy it. And then we did 450 on a raffle. And we had no idea how many people would register to the raffle. Remember, all of this is still not on our website. It's not on our social media. We've created then a M.A.D.Edition page on our Instagram. That's all. And I put on my account, personal account, that, okay, this is what we're doing, guys. And I can't remember how many. I think it was 18,000 signed up. And now
I remember that because it was right before Watches and Wonders in 2022, which was to your point, the absolute peak of frenzy everywhere.
And here we go. Now we're looking at ourselves now. We should be jumping up with joy. We should be so happy. But we're looking at ourselves like going, now what do we do with this? And so that's when we decided. So then we did the raffle. And imagine 450 watches for 18,000 people signing up. So of course there were a lot of unhappy people. So then we decided, okay, maybe we should do another red raffle, which was the year after. It took another year. Again, we're learning. So, because the team was like, oh, maybe you should do another color. I'm like, wait, there's 17,500 people who wanted that red. Let's do another red for them. So we do another red. Okay, let's do a green. And it's just as we go. And then when we do the green, something amazing happens. I think I had 32,000 people signed up and we had 1,500 pieces by then. And at the end of the raffle, when we gave the results out, I saw again a wave of people really pissed off. Oh, I've played 3 times, didn't get it. The flippers keep on getting it. I really want it. I can't get it. I'm so fed up with these bastards. Oh my God. You're trying to create something which is supposed to give happiness and you're actually creating so much anger. And we do a feedback meeting after that raffle with the team. And I tell the team, look, guys, I'm again seeing a lot of anger on social media. And I think it's Harris who basically says, why don't we create a piece just for those who've lost 3 times? So we go to our data. How many people have lost 3 times? 1,200. Okay. How many people have lost twice? 12,000. How many people have lost once? 40,000. And we're like, okay, 1,200, we probably can make that work. And in that 45-minute meeting with the whole team around the table, we had the idea of the Lucky Clover, where we basically said, okay, everybody who's lost 3 times, we're going to do a special edition for you guys. And 3 weeks later, I do again a little film. Well, the whole team does a whole little film, which is really cool. And we send an email out to all those who've lost 3 times saying, okay, we've created something for you guys. Nothing of all this is planned. This is just going on. And this also explains why people keep on saying, when's MAD 2 coming? I'm like, guys, there was never supposed to be a MAD 2. So by the time we wrapped our head around the fact that, A, we can't escape what we're doing here, and getting our whole logistics into action to make this happen, well, and also creating all sorts of new ideas where, oh, that sapphire doesn't cost $3,000 to make. It's been, my gosh, it's been, I think we could do an MBA course on this, on whatever you should never do, and that the guys at MB&F did. And it actually, in a weird way, worked out.
So you guys weren't just doing raffles for watches. I mean, a lot, I would assume, had to change under the hood at MB&F in terms of the way you were running the business. You know, who's on staff, what they're doing, who your suppliers are, how you're managing the production and manufacture of these things.
The logistics of shipping.
All of that sort of stuff. So while the team meetings and the raffles and the social media rants are happening, what's happening behind the scenes at MB&F to change the way you guys run as a company to manage all of this?
So as I said, the first 500 pieces we all did internally, and we shipped internally, and everything was done internally. And it was okay. We could deal with those. Then when it got bigger, it was clear there is no way we can continue this. And that's what I remember telling, actually, in my first video. If we integrate this, we're going to put MB&F in serious jeopardy. And so we had to find partners, reliable partners we could outsource. So this has been a 3-year process. And today, so all the M.A.D. ones are, so all the Miyota M.A.D. ones, because now there's the La Joux one, but the Miyota M.A.D. ones were modified and assembled in Switzerland. And we found 3 little, basically, companies of a few watchmakers who were looking for work. And we said, like, guys, this is what we can give you. And they were like so happy to do that. So that worked out well. The shipping, the whole FedEx system, and FedEx in the US. Oh my gosh, what a disaster. So then I think we moved to DHL. And so all the things we learned, that the whole computer system, the raffle system, the payment system, it was crazy. And more importantly, the customer service. Because we're used to giving, I think, an incredible service to all our MB&F customers. It's again, treat people the way you want to be treated. Everybody tells us that we're pretty good at what we do. We wanted to give the same to somebody who buys a M.A.D. watch. Now, between those who bought it and those who didn't manage to get it, and those who didn't understand how to register, and those who didn't understand how to pay, and those who basically won but were wondering when it was coming, do you realize the thousands of messages and emails we've been getting? It's been incredible. And I have to give incredible hats off to the little team we built. 3 youngsters. All 3, we got them out of college. And I'm super proud of that. I mean, I think there's nothing when you grow older to know that you've given their first chance to somebody coming out of college to have their first job. Because somebody did that for me and somebody did that for you guys. And these 3 are, they must be drinking Red Bull all day. I mean, these guys are on fire, and they've basically taken this project as if it was their company. And when we do raffle, they have to physically and mentally prepare for those 7 to 10 days, because it's insane. It's insane the amount of messages they get. At the moment we announce there is a raffle guide. And then when the raffle results are given, to deal with all the unhappy people, angry people. And we also had something else we discovered. Unethical people. That's something which doesn't exist. And I mean, we don't have people lying to us to try and get an MB&F. Well, we didn't previously, now a little bit, but it was crazy. We started having to, so there were people who were registering not fake, but I mean, they were registering MB&Fs to try and get onto the tribe to be able to get a M.A.D. one to flip it, but they never had an MB&F. So because they'd seen some serial number somewhere on Instagram, and we got conned at the beginning. And then we started having to become...
Wow, that watch is getting sold a lot.
I'll tell you a story. I probably shouldn't tell you a story. I was going to give a lot of ideas. We got, when we started on the first red, and we said, look, you have to be either you're a tribe member and you get access directly, or you have to go through the raffle. Suddenly, the same watch got registered, MB&F watch, got registered by 10 different people at the same time on the tribe. So then we said,
sure,
okay.
You told me I was the only one who had that serial number.
So we said, okay, how are we going to deal with this? Okay, you send me a photo of the back of the watch and the watch at 2:52. You send me the same about a watch at 10:12, etc., etc. All 10 came back with the right photos. What is happening here? What exactly is happening here? And we realized there was a watch at a second-hand dealer in Singapore. And 10 guys in Singapore were going back to the dealer, putting it at the right time, taking the photo, sending it to us. Of course, they were all blacklisted immediately. But We had to deal with stuff like
sure,
this.
but on the other hand, like it's unscrupulous, but there's a certain charm when you consider the incredible amount of effort that went into that level of just like, subterfuge. Like that's a real commitment.
There's a part of us which is flattered for sure.
Yeah.
But it triggers us. I mean, it really does. And I must admit, the flippers and the scammers really trigger us. If you know our values, how deep they run, it really drives us crazy. I remember of a guy, I think it was on the second red, who had actually won the raffle. And we also had to find ways how we're going to deliver the watches. So, because we can't deliver 1,000 watches in 1 month, of course.
No.
So it was actually the people who paid first who got the watches first. So we tried to find every time something which seemed fair. And there was a German gentleman who kept on writing to us saying, going to be married. My wedding is on, 20th of June. This is in March, right? And please, I really want it for my wedding. And he was like, I had paid last. I was like, oh no, we can't do this. But he kept on writing to us. And one day the team was like, okay, let's make an exception. And we shipped the watch, I'm going to say on the 14th of June. On the 15th, it was on Chrono 24. You do not know what happened to my team. I think one of them told me, I'm going to take a baseball bat. I'm going to Germany. I'm going to bash them up. I was like, you can't understand the feeling of being betrayed because you try and do things right and people try and con you. And you know why it's so painful? Because there's so many more people who actually would love that watch. There's so many people who would so much enjoy wearing that watch and who deserve that watch rather than that dude, I'm going to say, who basically conned us. So yeah, we have to deal with that. So I'm amazed that this team of 3 managed to deal with all of this. They've got my utmost admiration. They're incredible. And it's a great learning curve for them also. I mean, it reminds me of being thrown into the deep end at Jägerle 33 years ago, and like a youngster coming out of college, like, oh, deal with it, sort of thing. And they've done a great job.
I'm listening to you say this, and as I piece together just from what you're describing, MB&F started, and you've said this many times, with I think all of your money essentially. So
Absolutely.
it was high risk, potential high reward. And here you are with M.A.D.Editions right now, which I don't want to tell me if I'm making an assumption, but if M.A.D.Editions went away tomorrow, MB&F would still continue, and that the revenue, it's not like M.A.D.Editions is driving the revenue of MB&F in such a way where if it went away, it would be problematic, I assume. So
that's what we've basically built into the business model.
And that's what I'm getting at, which is you have now this.
M.A.D.Edition we cannot, let's put it this way, it cannot endanger MB&F. So if suddenly the whole revenue disappeared, MB&F has to be able to stand on its own feet. But it's also M.A.D.Edition is not a big profit driver. So at that price point.
No, but this is what I'm getting at, because it's not tied to, or MB&F is not dependent on it. To a certain degree, you're operating in a zone that I think a lot of entrepreneurs never do, which is if it fails, you don't fail. And if it's successful, you can explore all these new terrains. So it's not risk-free. Nothing is risk-free, but it's a very different risk-benefit structure than when you started MB&F, it sounds like. So in that instance, do you, like, when you think about the watches that your team is creating for MB&F and you think about what future iterations might look like for M.A.D.Editions, are there different constraints, money aside, that you put yourself under with these two different brands? Does one carry more risk for you or less risk for you creatively?
Creatively. It's interesting because I was already schizophrenic at MB&F between horological machines and legacy machines, which are very, very different creative processes, both of them. And I love doing both. Now with M.A.D.Edition, it's a third ecosystem, complete independent ecosystem. And I think growing older, what really gets my adrenaline up is learning. And you've heard me say that before. It's that this whole, you learn something and I've already said it once. The whole point of MB&F is for me to be proud the last day of my life. to be able to look back and say, as a human being, as a creator, I'm proud of what I've done. And you get pride by taking risks. You get pride by putting yourself in difficulty and by solving riddles. And easy stuff doesn't really make you proud. So, I mean, that's a bit the story of M.B&F. If you could say that we're masochists, I would tend to agree a little bit with you. That's the way it functions. So, coming back to M.A.D., I'll come to another point, which has been really interesting in our creative process, is that I'm very, very, very scared that M.A.D. 1, because it's, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be very humble, so cool at that price point, is how am I going to come out with something which is as cool for M.A.D. 2? Well, I won't. It's impossible. It's not possible to come out with the same wow factor in M.A.D. 2 as with M.A.D. 1, and same with 3 and 4. And it's that one-hit wonder scare. Like the group which came out with that song which went 100 times platinum around the world, and whatever they come out as a second song, everybody's going to be disappointed. And so this has been really interesting as a process, because there was a moment where, when we were discussing our ideas, a big part of the team was like, we have to keep that rotor on the top because that's what everybody loves and that's so cool. And I felt, nah, it's an edition. It's not a brand. If it's a brand layout, okay, then the graphic marker, design marker is a rotor on the top. But we said it's an edition, which means that every edition should be a different creator, could be a different creator, and it could be a completely different animal. And then we have to live with the fact that people who are expecting something as crazy as M.A.D. 1 will be disappointed with M.A.D. 2 and 3 and 4. But they're very, very different animals. And therefore, we're terrified again. But it's okay, because we're always going to produce much less than what we believe now that we've understood the market is. So if there's much less demand because it's not as crazy or people don't like it as much, we'll make much less pieces. So the whole point is to create. The whole point is the journey, the community is, you're going to see that M.A.D. 2 is not my name on it. It's somebody else's name. M.A.D. 3 is not my name. M.A.D. 4 is not my name. And working with other creators who've had ideas, that makes us proud. And important is that we are all at MB&F / M.A.D.Editions proud of the piece which comes out. And I'll come to the last point. It was like, so what defines M.A.D.Edition? And we've come to one consensus in the team. It has to give great value for money. We're going to try to keep every single piece at 2,900 francs, which at today's dollar is probably 3,400. Used to be 2,600 a few years ago. And sorry, we're not increasing our prices. I'm just telling that to all the people who keep on saying, oh, these Swiss watch manufacturers, bastards, increasing their prices. It's the dollar which is sinking, at least in our case. And so all of our pieces we're trying to sell at that price point. And it'll maybe be super classic or super crazy. But when you wear it on your wrist, nobody can believe it's at that price.
So, it's interesting that you mention value and price positioning as being really important for M.A.D. 1. When most companies are thinking about adding a new product line or adding a new brand to their portfolio, oftentimes, the business school playbook is to go, quote unquote, up market, right? We've done well in this particular area. Now let's really make some money by going up market. And there's a fear, it's almost anathema to a lot of business people, this idea of starting with a brand and a business at a particular price point and then moving, quote, down market, moving into a lower price position. Because of course, from a brand equity and a positioning standpoint, the fear is, if I do that, if I move into another product category that is less expensive than the one I'm in, it will cheapen my existing brand. It'll damage my equity. It will destroy perception of my brand. Now, of course, the way you described the journey of M.A.D.Editions is it wasn't started as a brand. This wasn't conceived in a boardroom or tested in a focus group or anything like that. It was quite organic in the way it evolved. But I guess the question would be, maybe you don't buy that way of thinking at all. And maybe that way of thinking is bullshit. But how does, if at all, how does M.A.D.Editions impact not just the operations of MB&F as a business, but how does it impact MB&F as a brand?
It sort of makes me think to something we realized a year ago, is that we're coming to our 20th anniversary at MB&F. In the last 20 years, one of the things which we're very proud of is that we've done everything wrong. Everything we've done was, compared to the MBA playbook, a management book, we've done it wrong. But we've done what we felt was right. We found our true north. We knew it was going to be tougher, but it felt right. And that's really one of the things which defines MB&F. And the same thing happens to M.A.D.Editions. What we feel right, we will do. Now, I agree with you, and that's I said at the beginning of the podcast, is that we were terrified that M.A.D.Editions would harm the image of MB&F. It should have. I remember I confided in somebody I trust who's a bit of a mentor figure for me. He's in his 70s. Before we did this, I was like, okay, I'm probably going to do this. And he told me, you can't. You just can't. You're going to kill MB&F. You should not do this. Do not do this. Oh my gosh, when somebody you look up to tells you that and you still do it, I can tell you, I'm reliving it as I'm talking about it. So what I realize, why is M.A.D.Editions not harming MB&F? Because it's super creative. Because it's not a toned down version of, it's not Emporio Armani to Giorgio Armani. It's not a cheaper t-shirt. It's not just you get the brand on it, but it costs 1/10 of the price. It's not at all that. And again, now I'm realizing this as we talk. What we created was, first of all, I don't think there was a market. I don't think there was any competitor. I don't think there was even, I think we opened up something for the whole world of, there's a market for some crazy looking watch at $3,000 when everybody who was doing $3,000 watches was doing copies of high-end watches. And so we tried something, and we're going to continue trying something. And the other thing which makes that M.A.D.Editions I don't think is going to harm, it may, but at least for the moment, MB&F, is that it's us, and we've got the same super strong values as individuals. And the way we treat people in 360 degrees. And yeah, we have to deal with the angry people, the frustrated clients. I mean, does it make you happy when you look on forums and people go, a Miura at $3,000? Oh, highway robbery. No. But I felt like, dude, you try and do that watch at the price I'm selling it, and then come to me. It's a Miura. Now it's not. It's a Le Jouperet now. And we kept the same price, which will, again, amaze everybody. It's like, okay, you're putting a Swiss-made movement? Yeah, because it's not a business. Because that's not how we perceive it. So,
see, at least that's not how we perceive it is the thing that I find fascinating, because I keep listening to you talk about this, and I think there are brands out there that would benefit from having such a strong perception of what it is that they stand for. But I'm listening to you talk, and of course you're saying it's not a brand, this is a project, it's a platform, it's not the same thing. But the way that you're approaching it, as I hear it at least, contains a lot of what is sometimes missing from similar watch brands. And what I mean by similar is somebody who's in that same price point. Where the reason, in fact, if I go further, I would say what's interesting to me about what you're saying is that the number one rule for MB&F, or pardon me, for M.A.D.Editions, aside from good value for the money, is that it needs a reason to exist.
Exactly.
And that right there is a pretty significant distinction between what we often see at this competitive price point and where I think a lot of people struggle, because they can express the value of the product, but they can't express the why of the product. And, that is a very profound thing, whether or not M.A.D.Editions is a brand or not, at least to my ear.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Because so 3 years ago, we sat, four of us in a room with a facilitator, because I tried to find the why of MB&F. And it was just at the beginning of M.A.D.Edition, by the way. And so for me, the why is easy. As I said, I just want to be proud. But for my whole team, it needs to be more than, we want Max to be proud. So we sat in that room, and I was expecting a whole day to pass by. And I think in 45 minutes, we nailed it. It's MB&F is here to inspire people to take more risks, to be more creative. And initially it was to think different, but it's actually evolved over the years, and it's become to find your true north. And there was a second why, which was very important for us, and you don't usually have, it's already got 3 in the first one. We build communities. It's very important for us to build communities. And M.A.D. is exactly that. Taking an insane risk, being super creative at a price point which normally wasn't, doing something that we find right, even though the textbooks tell us not to do it, and bringing together a community. It just fits. So whatever we do now going forward in the last 3 years, we always see if it ticks those 4 boxes. And if it does, we go ahead.
It's interesting that you point out that going back to the point about M.A.D.Editions and how it relates to and the value of MB&F, and the fact that both of them are driven by creativity. As soon as you said that, it's like, well, yeah, of course. Like a M.A.D.Edition is no less creative than a horological machine or a legacy machine, and vice versa, right? They're very creative. Creativity is at its core. And I think where a lot of brands, this is both true in the watch industry and brand management in general, a lot of luxury brands think of themselves really just in terms of price positioning. And if I look at the way, Asher and I have talked about this, you don't have to comment on this, but if I look at the way like Swatch Group has managed their portfolios, Asher and I have talked about this on the podcast. It's really about price positioning. Every brand in that portfolio, or at least it seems to us as outsiders looking at how they operate, exists and is positioned in a particular lane defined by price point. And I think that's where some people have trouble understanding, well, what's interesting about, without knowing too much about it, what's interesting about a Tissot versus a Longines versus a Hamilton versus an Omega? Now, of course, all of those brands have deep histories and there's a lot of interesting things within them. But beyond a watch category, when you just define a brand by its price positioning, you've almost lost the point. Because Asher, as you've said, you forget the fundamental question, which is, why are we even doing this?
Especially in our world, as we all know that nobody needs a mechanical watch. Isn't that insane? We all know it. The only reason it exists for me is a mechanical watch is where engineering meets beauty, where it meets humanity. Those are the 3 elements. And it's interesting because as an engineer, when I was doing in college, it was really tough for me to do my engineering studies because there was no beauty and no humanity. It was only about solving equations, finding the most cost-effective, most efficient way of solving an issue, which is great. It taught me so much. But there was no beauty. There was no humanity. And that's what I found a family in the watch world, in the mechanical watch world. And let's not forget that. Let's not forget, especially the humanity side.
I don't see how we could find a better place to stop than this, because we could keep going here.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Asher. It's been a great pleasure.
The pleasure is ours. And I can tell you, at least for Asher and me, it is true. You have inspired us to take risks, to be more creative, and to find our true north. And thank you for that. And thank you for listening to Open Work. It's a production of Collective Horology. You can find us online at collectivehorology.com. And you can, of course, find Max and MB&F online at mb&f.com. Of course, to get in touch with any questions, feedback, or suggestions, just email podcast@collectivehorology.com.